money service business, you have to think compliance first, because even though you want to think about growth and building great tech and everything, and you do need to have that as well, I think, to build, a successful money service business in this day and age, but you always have to think compliance first to make sure that all your ducks are in a row. When the bank asks you any questions, you have all the documents that you need prepared. The more preparation you do and showing that to the bank, I think that's the best way to give them kind of confidence in their ability, and that takes a lot of risk off the table for them. I think that the banks, especially the big five, they have so many businesses they're working with. Money service businesses are just some tiny little segment of a small industry in their eyes. So not a lot of people are familiar with it. Compliance will shut it down right away. So you have to kind of educate them and help them understand that we're not some sleazy pawn shop on the corner that's and I'm not saying pawn shops are always sleazy, but on the corner that's accepting cash from potentially drug dealers and stuff like that. If you build a technology-based business that doesn't accept cash, and you're dealing with legitimate businesses or legitimate, well-known individuals that you can transfer money for, that takes a lot of risk off the table. So many banks not too many banks who are into the government savings. So we started with bank running accounts with them. Then we got several other accounts after we get the first one operating. It's pretty lengthy process. I know BMOs are only accepting applications. There's a cost involved. I think it's up to $3,000. It's a really challenging environment, but the best thing that you can do is, like I said, get an expert in compliance on your team. Really make sure you do a great job of tracking everything, all your processes, and if you have all that in a row, when you go through the deeper due diligence, I'm sure at some point a bank will probably open their door to you. And it's sad because the industry shouldn't be this closed off, I don't think, and it actually doing this whole that's globally the currency risk it makes it a more dangerous environment. Then you have MSPs going underground, starting to deal with more cash or something, and you probably end up with more criminals out of that than you would if you actually oversaw these businesses and make sure you have the department that will kind of make sure everything's in order and everything's done correctly. So hopefully things will change in the future when they see more business models with currency cloud services and technology-based businesses to come in. I think once the banks see more of that, I think then confidence in the industry grows more. Ultimately, it was concerned, we're all trying to build a more automated, efficient system, and that way we can pass down those savings to the customers, and then they're not paying these high fees that they're stuck with today too. So
yeah, no, I appreciate that. And one of the things that I guess that we're seeing as an overall industry is that, as you mentioned, there are numerous different types of business models in the MSP market. So do you see a need or a value of categorizing MSPs so that the banks are seeing them as a different risk approach going forward, or do you think that's something that it would be off the table for them? Because I think for the industry-wide, it's a completely different business model from a pawn shop collecting cash to do transfers, or someone like yourself taking wires and then moving them across the border.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, Chris. To be honest, that would make a lot of sense, right? You should categorize the MSPs into different risk levels, right? Like you would any other client. I guess currently the banks are just saying extremely high risk, and then it gets taken to the compliance team, and they typically say, oh, it's an MSP, we don't touch it. They'll just shut it down right away. But yeah, if you can prove to them that your business model's, a lot more sound, there's less risk involved in it, I think that they should pay more attention to that. Like I mentioned before, we have this oligopoly in Canada, so you got the big five banks. They have a ton of other businesses they work with, lots of other lucrative, businesses they can go down. Money service businesses just seem to not be as attractive to them in general. Ultimately, it's a little bit, challenging for them too, because they have to have a business case for it. On the one hand, they're regulated, so they have to give bank accounts to presumably everybody is what they're supposed to do. And then you have this business coming in that's kind of undercutting an area of their business as well. So it's a tough situation, I think, and that's why I think it's important to find those kind of smaller banks that are hungry for business, that want to innovate and want to, build better fintech products out there. And then those banks tend to be more susceptible to this. And I'm hopeful that the MSPs will be given opportunities like they should, right? And there should be more competition for me in Canada too. I mean, we've built this kind of fintech automated style MSP, and there's not a lot of competition here for us. So I guess in a way it's good for, you know, the business and myself, but I would like to see more competition in general because I ultimately just want to help people. So it's better to have more entrants in the market because the more competition you have, it'll drive prices down and it'll just be better for the overall consumer. So that's kind of the end goal to this, is to really just help the consumer. So I hope it happens. I hope they do start categorizing it differently or opening up new accounts for new entrants that are coming in too.
Yeah, we do too. The more we see these business models coming about, I think at some point there has to be necessary vertical for this, this MSP world, this internet MSP world, rather than brick and mortar MSP world. So I did want to discuss before we close your client base. So you did mention that Canadian businesses needing to do cross-border payments. If you can elaborate a bit on that, the type of clients you have, different prospective clients that you're looking for, that'll really help broaden the verticals for us as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I can't really speak to other countries because I haven't had the time really to do analysis on our global expansion. But within Canada, we realize there's a really large, but it's a very niche market, and what we call it is the micro-sized businesses. They're companies that are typically less than 5 years old, so they're early companies in the bank size. They don't have predictable cash flows or like strong revenue growth yet, and maybe 5 million to 10 million or less in revenue, and 10 employees or less. So these companies tend to be underserved because the banks don't want to give the advanced online platform to them because they don't have the proper risk models to manage it, like the automation of their risk models and everything. So instead of taking on that risk and servicing that market correctly, they're basically saying go down to the branch so we can ID you in person when you're sending a wire, and then we'll have them do the fraud checks and everything at the front lines at a teller. But for a small business owner that's, the chief of sales, chief financial officer, the CEO, like this individual man or woman doesn't have the time to be running down to the bank, a couple times a week just to send a wire to China because they're importing some product. You have to build a more efficient system for them and allow them to, have that level of convenience. And then as well, the fees tend to be really high for smaller transactions. And ultimately, it makes sense when you have manual